Are you someone who your leg always has a tendency to kind of flop out to the side? Well, then this video is for you. If you're new to this channel, I'm Tara, I'm a neurologic physical therapist, and on this channel we talk about anything and everything related to mobility, health, fitness, mindset, in the context of neurologic injury, with the end goal of empowering you with as many tools as possible to reach your highest maximum potential. And all that being said, today we're going to talk about a very common problem, those of you where your leg just has a tendency to flop out to the side. Now, in this video, what I'm going to focus on are those of you where your knee points out to the side, not necessarily where your foot points out to the side. And the root causes are a little bit different depending on whether or not it's your knee or your foot. So today we're just focusing on those of you where your knee flops out to the side, if you're sitting, or it flops out to the side when you're trying to swing that leg around the side when you're actually taking a step, or if you're just working on standing. If you look in the mirror, if you notice that one leg kind of goes straight and the other leg looks like it's kind of bowed, then those are the issues. The root causes of those issues are what I'm going to cover in this video. So first we're going to go into why this happens, or some of the underlying movement problems associated with a neurologic injury that might be contributing to this, as well as solutions on how to address this issue depending on what positions. So whether you're sitting, standing, or walking, I'm going to give you some exercises that you can start doing today to help minimize the severity of that leg rotating out. Now, before I dive into the content of this video, I also want to give one little teaser that if you are a therapist, I'm going to give probably my most important tip to physical therapists at the end of this video. So you definitely want to stick around for that. So first and foremost, why does this happen in the first place? And there are a lot of different reasons, and most likely you probably have a couple of these things going on. But the most obvious is that the muscles that rotate the leg outward are just tight. So that would be primarily your gluteus maximus and some deeper hip rotator muscles. But for the most part, your glute max is tight. That's an out external rotator. So when it's shortened, it's pulling that leg into external rotation. The most common reason for this is in the early stages of your recovery, you spend a lot of time in bed. In most cases, when a leg is weak and the sheets are laying on top of your bed, if you're in the hospital bed, that leg will flop out to the side. If you sat for a long period of time, again, in the early stages, if that leg was weak, it stayed flopped out to the side just because it was weak. And so again, those muscles would adaptively shorten and become tight. The other reason is neglect. So for those of you who know you have neglect, or you've heard your therapist use that term, that's another thing that can kind of cause this leg to look like it's flopped out to the side. In most cases, generally speaking, if you have neglect, you shift a little bit more towards your uninvolved side, and just the way that your body kind of shears in one direction, just based on physics, that leg is just gonna kind of want to rotate out to the side. So now let's talk about the muscles that are underactive or kind of have a poor connection with the brain. There are a few muscles that if they are not getting good input from the brain, they will also have a tendency to make that leg kind of flop out to the side. Primarily the muscles that rotate the leg inward. So if you think about it, if you don't have a brain connection with those muscles that rotate the leg inward, then the pulley on the outside, or the stabilizing rope on the outside of that structure, is going to pull it in the opposite direction. It's like those trees that you see that are kind of staked into the ground. If you pull one of those stakes up, it's going to pull in the opposite direction. Well, that's kind of the way that our muscles balance around a joint. So muscles on the inside of the leg are weak, muscles on the outside of the leg are still very active, pulling that leg into external rotation. The other muscle group that you might have decreased connection with are the muscles that adduct the legs. So the muscles that bring the legs together. If you don't have a great connection with those, again, same thing, that leg will kind of get pulled out to the side. Now, there's one other group, and this is only going to come into play when you're walking, is a poor connection with the hip flexor muscles. So the muscles that bring the legs straight through. If you don't have a good connection with those muscles, then some people will have a tendency to use more of their adductors to pull the leg through. And so again, that will cause that leg to kind of rotate out to the side only when you're walking. The other reason is, of course, you guys knew I was going to bring up these two, is an abnormal synergy pattern and or spasticity. So people that have primarily a flexor synergy pattern that's predominant. So just a review, I always review it when I bring up this word. An abnormal synergy pattern is very common after damage to the brain. And what it is it's just when muscles link up abnormally. So muscles link together and they fire together in an abnormal way. And in this case, a flexor synergy pattern, the muscles that link up together are when you flex the hip up, that also engages or fires the muscles that rotate the leg out. So again, when you're walking, that's what would happen. You flex that hip up, it also rotates that leg out. That's why you see that leg flop out to the side. Now, this is one where you'll also see in sitting. So if you have a predominantly flexor pattern, again, when you're sitting, your hip is already flexed. So if you have a very strong abnormal flexor synergy, then again, because you've passively flexed the hip in sitting, it's gonna wanna rotate out to the side. And then moving on to the spasticity, if you have spasticity in the gastrocsoleus and posterior tibialis, meaning your foot has a tendency to point down and turn in, then when you go to stand on the leg, then the foot will roll to the outside. It's kind of hard to visualize unless you have this problem. So maybe now that I've described it, you can look for it, but it's really something that if you have it, you know what I'm talking about. But if your foot inverts or rolls to the outside, then your whole leg, just based on physics, is going to roll to the outside of that foot, which is going to give the appearance, or it actually does externally rotate that leg. So now we're going to talk about the upper quadrant a little bit, because some of the exercises I'm going to do are going to include the upper quadrant. So there's some spasticity in the upper quadrant that can also cause this external rotation in the leg, primarily the latissimus. So if you have an involuntary contraction in your latissimus or your pec major, your pec minor, and to a lesser degree, the bicep, because the bicep does cross the shoulder joint. You got to stick with me on this one. What that does is that pulls that shoulder in and across your body towards the opposite side and brings it downward. So just as a kind of a counterbalance with all that force pulling this way, when you go to swing that leg through, or even when you're standing on that leg, it has to go out to the side just to keep you balanced. So we are going to work some kind of dual purpose exercises where we incorporate the upper extremity and the lower extremity, or I guess these would be called more global exercises where we're not localizing to one specific muscle, but we are going to include some exercises that incorporate the arm and the leg. So very, very important to keep that in mind. You never want to give up on that arm, even if you're not seeing these huge progressions with the arm. A lot of people kind of, lose motivation to do the exercises. Do not give up on that arm. If that spasticity just continuously takes over, they're going to get tighter and tighter and tighter and shorter and shorter and shorter, and it's going to keep pulling you in that direction, and it's going to keep having a bigger and bigger impact on your walking. So I hope all of that made sense. Now we're going to head over to the gym. I'm going to go over some exercises to stretch the tight muscles I mentioned, some exercises to isolate movement retraining to break up that flexor synergy pattern, primarily isolated hip internal rotation, isolated hip flexion without having that synergy occur where all those muscles are linked up together. So breaking up that synergy pattern. And then of course some drills to help incorporate these new movement patterns into standing and walking. So in the first section of this video, we're going to go through stretches to stretch the leg towards internal rotation. Then what we're going to do is we're going to focus on isolating movement. So we want to break up that abnormal synergy pattern. So you want to be able to isolate hip flexion without the external rotation. So we're actually going to work on flexing the hip and internally rotating the leg. And then I always like to try and put it all together. The last section of the video is going to focus on kind of functional movement retraining, working on standing, sit to stands, and walking without that knee rotating out to the side. So let's go ahead and dive in. So this is a hip internal rotation stretch. You just want to have that foot positioned a little bit out to the side on a step that's probably anywhere from 6 to 8 inches tall. And then you're just going to drop that knee in towards your other knee. making sure not to lean. So you really want to make sure that your hip stays down so that you really get that good internal rotation. So what we're doing for this exercise is we're working hip internal rotation. I tried to mark the leg that we're working. So this is the leg that we're working, the leg with the duct tape on it. And this is what I would consider like an active assisted internal rotation. And again, we're trying to work on active hip internal rotation. So you want your knees to stay really close together for this, and then you're moving that involved leg, you're just moving that foot out to the side. Really kind of pay attention to your knee, and you're trying to get your knee to kind of rotate, or the top of your thigh to kind of rotate towards your other leg as that foot kicks out. So you want your knees to stay together for this one. And then you're basically, the working leg is on top, and you're basically just trying to get that foot up off of your other foot. Flexion exercise that you would do in the very early stages. And you're just pulling that knee in towards the chest. So you can see I'm having to squeeze this block together. You're going to have the strap holding your knees together. They should be touching. Feet slightly further apart. The yoga block helps to maintain this position. And then you're just going to do little sit to stands. So having to squeeze this yoga block in between your knees as you do it will help to kind of start retraining that leg to stay internally rotated or slightly adducted, the legs coming together. And then you're just going to do some forward, backward stepping. And again, just doing forward, backward stepping. So again, the band is trying to externally rotate my leg or pull my knee out to the side. And I'm really fighting to keep it internally rotated or keeping it pulling, resisting that band as I step that other foot back and then step them together. So again, you're just standing and just rotating those arms toward your involved side. And my job for this one is just to try and maintain my hands directly in front of my face. So not letting the band or the resistance pull my body that way, really engaging all of the muscles on this upper part of the back over here in the trunk. And then once you feel good with that, you can try and go into a little bit of a step. Again, the goal is to not let the resistance band pull your arms that way, but to keep them directly in front of you as you perform that backward step. So I hope all of that made sense. I hope you guys found this video helpful. And one last thing, back to that little teaser I gave at the beginning of this video. I watched a really good video recently on YouTube where Robert Greene was interviewed. If you don't know who Robert Greene is, he's an excellent author. His books are amazing. They really help you understand why humans behave the way they do. but he also suffered a stroke, and he did an interview recently, and the entire interview was so insightful and so hopeful. So I will link the video in the description below. I highly recommend if you've suffered a stroke or even if you have MS, it is worth the watch. But in that video, he mentioned that physical therapy was boring. Now, this is specifically for you therapists and you patients as well, that's one thing that, you know, if an activity is not purposeful and meaningful, A, it's gonna be boring. The therapy sessions are gonna be boring, but B, also it's harder for your brain to latch onto those. Our brain likes to latch onto things to activities or exercises that have meaning and they have purpose. So if you are a therapist and your patient isn't verbalizing that they're not having fun or that they're bored, you can pick it up in their body language. It's very easy to pick up, and I am like hypersensitive to that, because if they're not enjoying it, it means it doesn't have purpose and it doesn't have meaning. All that being said, get creative, think outside the box, use tools, use props. You see me use a ton of stuff on here that's very cheap. PVC, duct tape, straps, whatever you can to get the normalized movement you want, while challenging them to something that is interesting to them. So if someone wants to return to hiking or going upstairs or riding a bike, anything that you don't feel like you're gonna get good quality movement, think outside the box, get creative, find a way to normalize that movement while also incorporating higher level activities in there that they enjoy. Where there's a will and a little bit of creativity and a little bit of optimism, there is a way to figure out how to make that activity they love and incorporate it into the therapy sessions. But I can't stress it enough that you know, we spend a lot of time with our patients, and I like to think that we are very good at, you know, communication and interacting with people, and so it should be easy to pick up whether or not your patient is at least enjoying a portion of it. Of course, it's not all gonna be fun, and some of it's gonna be boring, but I always end with something fun and something that they want to do. So enough about that. If you're new to this channel and you like this type of content, definitely hit that subscribe button, turn on that notification bell so that you'll get notified every time I upload new videos. I enjoyed spending time with you all today. If you like some of these exercises or clips of exercises that I showed in this video, I will put a link in the description below where you can sign up for our kind of premium product, which is our gold membership offered through our website, where you will have access to an entire vault of exercises. There's roughly 300 exercises in there right now, and more are being added every single week. So if you're interested in that, definitely click the link in the description to learn more about that product. I enjoyed spending time with you all today, and I will see you in the next video.